Hello, and welcome to the 2026 Virtual Summer Workshop Series hosted by Santa Clara University Career Center. I invite everyone, if you haven't already, to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where in the world you are zooming in from. We are very proud and excited to offer our Virtual Summer Workshop Series as a free series that is open to the public. And historically, we have seen people from all over the world zoom in, so we'd love to know where in the world you are zooming in from. I myself am in sunny and beautiful Silicon Valley. And as I mentioned, I'm Dylan Hool. I'm the executive director of the Career Center. And today's workshop is focused on understanding the role that artificial intelligence is playing in how employers find, screen, and select candidates. I know this is top of mind for everyone, and we're excited to have the experts at Jobscan lead this workshop. Recruiters use applicant tracking software to filter applicants. Widely used ATS software that you may be familiar with include Workday, Greenhouse, but there are many different ones. JobScan can detect the exact applicant tracking system used on every job posting and then uses AI to show you exactly how to optimize your resume for each ATS's specific parsing rules and ranking weights. It's a very powerful tool. So I'd like to welcome and introduce my friends, Liana Johan and Nick Ebling, who will be leading today's session. They should be spotlighted on your screen along with me. Nick is a senior account manager with JobScan, overseeing all university partnerships. He has been with JobScan for 5 years. He earned his bachelor's degree from Western Washington University, and he is zooming in from Seattle. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
Liana is a senior customer success and education manager, also at JobScan. Liana has been with JobScan for close to 3 years and has previous experience working as a career advisor for college students. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Toronto in Canada and is zooming in today from Vancouver. Welcome, Liana.
Thank you, Dylan. Hi, everyone, and good afternoon.
Fantastic. Well, without further ado, Nick and Liana, I'll let you two take it from here.
Hey, Nick, you want to say a quick hi before we
Yeah.
get started?
Yeah. Hey everyone. Thanks for having me. Happy Wednesday. Yeah, we're on Wednesday, right? Hopefully you're all enjoying the weather. Today we're gonna address kind of an overview into applicant tracking systems and AI within the recruiting space.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Lena.
Yeah, thanks. Well, hi everyone. Very excited to see you all here. Throughout this presentation, as Nick mentioned, we are looking at recruiters utilizing AI in the recruiting space and how it impacts you as a potential job seekers. Great use of the chat, everybody, during the session. Nick and I love taking your questions as they come, so feel free to utilize the chat for your questions, your comments, your thoughts, your feelings about anything that we are sharing today, as well as the use of reactions. I think everyone has the use of react button here. So to practice, I'm seeing some thumbs up already. Give me a thumbs up or your favorite emoji if you are actively job seeking right now. Oh, a ton. We got some hearts, we got some thumbs up, we have some cheering sounds. So a ton of job seekers here today. So perfect. Today's presentation is about the recruiting side of AI or and how recruiters are going to make decisions on applications like yours. So these are things that are going to impact you throughout your job search. We're also going to share strategies on how you can best utilize the resources available to you to increase your chances at getting interviews, even outside of just your application. So we're going to give you lots of strategies that you can employ throughout your job search. Okay, so we're going to get things started here. I'm going to share my screen and Nick is going to kick us off. Give me 1 second. Before that, I did want to open the chat just to make sure I can see everybody. Okay, perfect. Um, let's go, Nick.
All right, thanks, Lena. A little bit more of housekeeping too. So what we're going to kind of present here is the automation that's utilized by recruiters to kind of scale the job of recruiting. And really, our best practice here is to utilize automation to counter automation. And that's where a tool like JobScan comes into play. So for those of you that are Santa Clara students or alumni, you do have instant free access to Jobscan. And for those of you that are a part of the community but are not a part of the university, we are going to supply a promo code today for you to get access to Jobscan. Quick heads up on that promo code. That promo code goes for 3 months. And if you don't cancel it, it will renew you at the full price. So please, if you want to use it for those 3 months. Otherwise, it will be a full price. But I'm going to put that into the chat right now so that you have it. And then additionally, meeting with everybody. There we go. Additionally, make sure to pay attention today. We are going to have a couple of pop quiz questions for some giveaways. So get your fingers ready. I'll give you a quick heads up when that starts. But let's start this off. So why do we use a tool like JobScan? Well, like I said, there are systems called applicant tracking systems or ATSs that are in place to scale the job of a recruiter. And I usually like to start this off with an analogy as to like why these are present. Any Amazon posting will yield upwards of 2,000 applicants a day. That being said, if I'm a recruiter for Amazon, I'm not going to spend my day thumbing through 2,000 different resumes. Instead, I'm going to take those resumes, put them into a form of automation called an ATS or applicant tracking system. That system will identify things like section headings, date formattings, tenses of terminology, job title matching, education matching. It's going to use software to determine who are the best candidates out of this pool of applicants. From there, the ATS may display potentially 30 individuals for me to then look through the resumes and actually identify who I'm going to call back. We know that statistically, recruiters take about 6 to 7 seconds per resume. So our intentions here, well, let's say they call back maybe 5 individuals on that ATS list. Our intentions here as job seekers are to become one of the 2,000 that have applied, to one of the 30 that get to the top of the ATS, to one of the 5 that actually get that call back. And that's what we're going to showcase today. Next slide, please. So, ATSs, they're utilized heavily. Of course, across the Fortune 500 companies, we see these companies get a lot of applications, and we know that they utilize applicant tracking systems heavily. You can see here that we conduct market research on roughly 99.4% of the Fortune 500 companies that are utilizing ATSs. This 98.4, these carry about these. I believe that our market research team does research on 70 applicant tracking systems. So I know Dylan had named a few from Greenhouse to Workday, Lever. Those systems are third-party systems that these companies are essentially purchasing to scale the job of their recruiting. This other 1% here, if any of you have ever applied for Google, you would know that Google uses a system called Google Hire. That's an in-house system. So they built out their own ATS. It's really difficult to get market research on that. But when you utilize a tool like JobScan, we can provide you with kind of a blanketed and universal understanding of how to get through applicant tracking systems. So next slide, please. I don't expect you to know a lot of these names on here, but if you have been applying recently, you may recognize a few. These are the most common applicant tracking systems across the US, and you can see their overall market share, I suppose. Greenhouse, definitely the most prominent. Lever we utilize here at JobScan because even here at JobScan, even though we're considered a startup, we still get a mass number of applicants and we only have one recruiter, so we need a way to scale that. I like to point out this slide too, because oftentimes if you're using any of the common job boards like LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, Glassdoor, when you click apply on those and it pops you out to a secondary window, you can oftentimes read in the URL something like greenhouse.com/Nike or lever.com/Adidas saying I'm applying to Nike or Adidas. The idea there is that you're leaving the job board, you're going into the ATS to actually fill out your application and profile to then send to the recruiter. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's like embedded in numbers and letters and code in there, but it's a good idea that if you're popping out to a secondary window, you're going into an ATS. The reason I like to display this is because the market research that we've done shows that every ATS is different. They have different qualifications, different requirements, and different ways to get through them. Honestly, in some ways, ATSs are a little bit unfair because they do weed out good competition all the time. You might have the right education, right experience, but you can have something as small as like the S on the end of customer services that's essentially counting you out. So what I've done today is I've taken a few screenshots directly from JobScan to identify a company and an ATS that they're utilizing.
What would be cool?
Oh, if you could, sorry. Well, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll address questions as well as we go along. So you can see here that I'm applying for a job at DoorDash Corporate. So Jobscan is able to identify that DoorDash utilizes a third-party ATS service called Greenhouse. So what are the specifications on Greenhouse? Well, first and foremost, you can see here that Greenhouse only accepts a .docx or PDF file format. So for any of you that are using a Mac right now and you're using Mac's, I think it's called Pages, it's like their Microsoft Word. Every time you download that document, it will download to a .txt. I can tell you right now that if you apply with that document in a TXT file format to any of the thousands of companies that utilize Greenhouse, that system's not going to be able to read your resume. They're likely not going to reach out to you and say, can you send us a different file type? Instead, you might get that email that says we decided to look in another direction. So that being said, PDF file formats are the most widely accepted file format across all ATSs, all the 70 that we conduct market research on. So if you're going to apply, always apply with a PDF. Additionally, Greenhouse does not recognize different tenses, abbreviations, or acronyms of skills and keywords. So what does this mean for me as the job seeker? Well, let's say I've got 5 years experience in sports marketing and I'm aiming for a role as a sports marketer. Well, marketing, marketer, you, me, and the recruiter, we know that these are synonyms, but this system isn't able to identify that. So matching tenses of terminology like they're listed in the job description can help us boost to the top of these ATS lists. Lastly, what makes Greenhouse unique is that Greenhouse uses the frequency of a skill to determine search result rankings. In other words, let's say I'm applying for a role in customer service and I've got customer service listed one time in my resume. There's another candidate that went into that same pool, applied to the same job posting that I saw, and they've got customer service listed 3 or 4 times. They're actually going to rank higher on this ATS based on the abundancy in which they have that terminology. So, Greenhouse. On the other side here, I'm applying for a job at Oracle, and Jobscan deciphers that Oracle utilizes Taleo. So some commonalities with Taleo that we see here are that Taleo does really struggle with common abbreviations. So terminology like PMP, CPA, MBA, we can put this on our resume, but if the job description itself is calling out for a Master's of Business Administration, we don't want to include just the acronym MBA on our resume. It's not going to be able to pick that up as, you know, exact terminology matching. In other words, our best practice here would be to spell out that acronym and then include the acronym at the end. It does look like Taleo can accept every single file type. However, we know that we're going to apply with a PDF. And then lastly, Taleo does not recognize different tenses, abbreviations, or acronyms of skills and keywords. So yet again, another system that in some ways is a little bit primitive in its inability to decipher between root stemming of terminology. Like I said, if you're applying for a lot of jobs and you're not getting calls back, it can be something as small as the S on the end of customer services or the ER on the end of marketer that's throwing that off. All right, so every ATS is different. They're utilized heavily across tons of different companies, whether they're Fortune 500 companies or startups. Now I'm going to pass it over to Leanna, who's going to talk about how ATS is parsed down.
So let's take a look at what these applicant tracking systems actually look like, what information is available to the recruiter, and how it helps them to make a very quick decision on who to move forward into the interview process. Again, the focus of having an applicant tracking system is to help speed things up, help the recruiter to find the top quality candidates, the top candidates to move the process on quickly, right? So this is our first example here. This one is called Oracle. This system here immediately sorts candidate from most recommended candidate to like least recommended candidate, as well as provides a visual indicator to the recruiter in this green health bar of how well the candidate matches with the job that's being posted or the role that is being hired for. Many ATSs have a visual indicator to the recruiter. Sometimes it's a green health bar, like here it is in Oracle. Sometimes it's a percentage match. Sometimes it's 4 out of 5 stars, 4 out of 5 smiley faces. But there's always usually a visual indicator to the recruiter to identify top candidates as determined by the algorithm within their system, their ATS here. So for this recruiter here, I can see that my ATS, my software, my system is recommending these 2 candidates as top candidates. They have full green health bars here, and they're sorted at the top of the list. So as the recruiter for this role, I might take a look at these 2 candidates first, take a look at their application, their resume, how they answered the pre-screening questions, and decide if I want to move them on into the interview process. If not, I can look at the next best candidate, the next best candidate, and the next best candidate here. And that's how recruiters can sort their time to pay attention to the candidates that have been deemed as recommended candidates by this algorithm first. So likely for the candidates that are at the bottom of the list, they might not get a chance to be reviewed. They might get an auto reject email here. Recruiter might have moved on enough people into the interview process already, right? Now, compare this to Workday. This is one that Dylan also had brought up as one of the more popular applicant tracking systems here. The visual indicator for Workday, as you can see, is a letter grade ranking system. So this tool here assigns a letter grade to the candidates based off their application. But more than that, you can see many differences compared to Oracle. For Workday, the list looks like a spreadsheet. So I'm getting a lot more information about the candidate even before going into review their application and their resume. I can see their name, I can see their current or last job, I can see how long they've been in that role, their highest degree, their location, and all of this information is filterable information for the recruiter to get an even more condensed top candidate list. So for this marketing coordinator role, there's about 178 applicants, but based off the job description, based off the applicants' information in their resume, based off of other hiring criteria that the recruiter has set, only about 12 candidates have been deemed as leads to review further and to see who they want to invite into the interview process. So for the other 166 candidates, they likely might get an auto reject email. They might likely will be saved into some archive folder, maybe not get the attention that these 12 candidates will have received here. Right? So that's differences again with another different applicant tracking system compared to Oracle here. Nick, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think this gives a really good visual here. So if I'm a recruiter and I'm hiring for this marketing coordinator role, let's say I put up the job posting and then 2 hours later I sign back into Workday and this is the pool that I see. 178 people have applied and there's 12 leads. Again, I haven't looked at a resume yet. I'm letting the system entirely basically do the first portion of my job for me here. Why would I go lower than the 12 leads that are already suggested here to look through resumes and vet candidates when the system has already identified that there's 12 potential leads here based on the content within their resumes? So this is the idea of getting in not just early, but getting to the top of the ATS to be considered here.
Mm-hmm. Good points, Nick. Thank you. Okay, similarly here for another ATS, this is SAP SuccessFactor. SAP SuccessFactor, popularly used by the Coca-Cola corporate companies. If you apply to a Coca-Cola corporate job, this is what your application looks like on their end for the recruiters. So SAP SuccessFactor also has a health bar here as the visual indicator to the recruiter, but this tool specifically shows skills compatibility. So for recruiting teams that use this tool here, they are prioritizing skills match. So a recruiter can hover over this health bar and a pop-up window will show the recruiter for this candidate specifically, these are the skills that they match with for the job and these are the skills that they're missing. So missing skills here are likely skills written in the job description that are not evident in your resume. So if you're not writing it on your resume, the recruiter and the system will assume if you're not writing it, that means you don't have this skill. So for a missing skill here, very quickly, a recruiter can say, oh, this skill right here is so crucial for our product, our services, our infrastructure, our clients, our services, all of that. We need somebody with a lot of familiarity with this particular skill or tool or platform. We do not have the resources or the time to train somebody new on this. We need someone who can hit the ground running. So unfortunately, even though you're one of our top 2 candidates here, because you're missing this skill, unfortunately, we'll send an auto reject and then look at the next best candidate here that does have this skill. So again, very quickly, a recruiter can decide, okay, you're missing this. Unfortunately, not moving on into the interview process. We'll need to filter for somebody else here. All right. And finally, what I want to show is iCIMS. iCIMS is developed by the Amazon company, so utilized by Amazon and AWS here. And one thing we want to show and highlight here is filtering capabilities. Many applicant tracking systems, their baseline programming is text parsing, right? So looking for the text that exists in your resume. So many of these systems have a filter, a text box filter here available, where recruiters can type in specific keywords to see candidates that have those keywords in their resume. So for this screenshot here, for a people's operations assistant, this recruiter is looking for the words business management. And in this filter, the system will show all candidates that have the words business management in their resume. I'll give you another example of how we utilize that at Jobscan. Last year, we were hiring for a financial analyst role here. And one of the first filters that our recruiter put in is QuickBooks. QuickBooks is the accounting and invoicing software that we use at JobScan. So you could be a financial analyst with like 20 plus years of experience, but if you did not write QuickBooks in your resume, unfortunately, you are filtered out because for us, we don't have time to teach somebody QuickBooks from scratch. We need somebody who's familiar with it so that they could be integrated into our work teams very quickly because we needed to hire somebody quickly. So this is how text filtering can come into play when recruiters are looking for specific things, which is why also back to Nick's example of that matching of terminology. And that's why it's important to match a terminology in the job description because in our job description, we wrote QuickBooks as a requirement for this job here. Yeah.
Yep. Not QuickBook, not Intuit QuickBooks, but
Like
QuickBooks is what we're
QuickBooks.
searching for. Same thing with iCIMS here. You're going to see that the recruiter has typed in business management, not business managing, not business manager. They're strictly looking for the terminology business management.
Mm-hmm. Good point, Nick. Thank you. So grammar always comes into play with how you are also representing those skills into your resume as closely as possible to the job description is what you want to match with it. Okay. All right. So over the last few years, we have seen so much budget go towards AI-powered recruiting tools. So these tools like applicant tracking systems are being powered with AI now, and not just for candidate sourcing and candidate matching, but video screening and interviewing as well. In the last year, we saw, based off one of the surveys that we have seen, about 50% of recruiters are also incorporating AI interviewing tools as part of their filtering process. So give me a thumbs up here if you have been on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, on Reddit, and you have seen people document their experience being interviewed by AI. Give me a thumbs up. Seeing some thumbs here. Oh, not as many as I thought. Okay. If you have the time today, if you wanted to, feel free to go on TikTok, Instagram, on Reddit, things like that. More and more people are documenting their experience being interviewed by sort of an AI agent, an AI tool here. This is going to be more and more common as AI gets a little bit more accessible. Some of these tools are very sophisticated. They can have a very organic conversation with you. They can ask you follow-up questions based off the answers that you provide. Some of these tools will be very expensive. Not all companies will utilize them yet, but we are seeing an upward trend of that being adopted by many, many, many companies in our industry here. So, Nick, why are we seeing so much growth of AI adoption for recruiting process?
Actually, before I jump into that, I
Okay.
want to do our first quiz question here. So open
Okay.
up your chats, get your fingers ready. I mentioned this when we first started here. Our prize here will be a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. Can anybody tell me what the most universally accepted file format is for all ATSs? Wow, that was so fun.
Whoa.
All right, who's the first? Wow, you guys all got it too. Rory West. Rory West, if you can send me a direct message with your email, we're gonna follow up with an Amazon gift card after this presentation, and then don't worry, there will be more. Okay, so the growth behind ATSs. I really think that the primary growth behind them is because these systems do work. Unfortunately, yes, they're unfair. They do weed out good competition all the time, but they scale the job of a recruiter. As you can see from these points here as well, there is a heavy increase in application volume. It seems like today there are a lot less jobs available and a lot more people looking to either transition positions or start their careers. So, increased application volume. Financial pressures as well, the need to scale with technology. It's significantly cheaper to purchase applicant tracking systems than it is to hire on more recruiters and have them thumb through resumes. This will expedite the process through and through. So, this growth really comes from the fact that they do work and the fact that they're cheaper than hiring on more people. While we do see like some companies will purchase an ATS and maybe it's not a good culture fit, maybe it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that they need. While they may switch from one ATS to a different third-party ATS, they oftentimes don't just get rid of ATSs and go back to outbound recruiting. The only other scenario here would be they purchase an ATS, they like the flow of it, but they want one that's a better culture fit, so they build one out like Google did with Google Hire. And these systems are not just used for screening candidates. They're also really embedded within company culture as they're used for internal and external communications. You can do benefits on them. There's one more, Leanne, and I'm missing it. Oh, there HR
Benefits,
screening tools.
payroll. Yeah.
Payroll. Yeah, yeah, that's it. So they're really embedded within company cultures. And again, they do work.
Okay, awesome. Carlson, you have a good question that I'm going to address towards the end of this presentation here about ATS moving to agents in the future. We'll address that at the end here, but that's a good question, and we're going to just parking lot that for a second here. Because I want to showcase an example of how this type of movement impacts companies of all sizes. So we did have a lot of examples around Fortune 500, but we wanted to share very real examples about here at Jobscan. So at Jobscan, we're a company about like 50 people. So we're still called a startup size. We are not a big Fortune 500 company yet. But even for us, we are impacted by the changes in the economy. And also because of that, we also needed to automate with applicant tracking systems. So to give you some context about how this has impacted us, sort of the economy, labor market, things like that. Last year, we were hiring for a content writer and a senior full stack engineer, these two positions, and we got about 600 and 500 applicants respectively here, right? Now compare this to the same two positions from 2022. In 22, for those same exact job descriptions, we only received 37 applicants and 62 applicants respectively. So in that time, we have seen almost 10x application volumes. As Nick mentioned at the top of the presentation, we have one single recruiter. He could not possibly by himself go through these thousands of applications by himself to help to identify top candidates for either role, which is why we use Lever as our ATS to help with this manual process, help with filtering, helping to identify top candidates quicker here. And just for sharing here, this is my role here. I was one of 900 applicants here for this particular role. And I applied for this job here within the first 2 hours. And these bulk of 900 came in within the first 4 days. So in terms of just volume of application, there's a ton of people looking for jobs, and so there's a ton of competition, but the timing of it as well, a lot of these people will apply very early, very soon. So timing also matters for you in terms of getting to the top of the pile. The sooner that you can apply, the better. We do find the sweet spot is the first 48 hours here. So the sooner you can apply, the better chances for you here. All right. So, again, for us, small company, we get a ton of applicants here. Nick was my hiring manager for this role here. It's going to be so overwhelming for Nick and our one recruiter to go through almost 1,000 applications manually by themselves. Here. Yeah. Okay. So based off of sort of this applicant tracking systems, we talk about them a lot. Let's look at the actual behavior of a recruiter within the applicant tracking systems. What are they actually looking for? What are the buttons that they are clicking and what are they filtering for? So part of our market research here at Jobscan is to conduct recruiter surveys. So we survey recruiters from every different type of industry, from every different level. So recruiters who hire entry-level roles to like senior management executive roles. And based off this survey, we put that into a report called State of the Job Search. And this is one of the infographics from that report here. So how do recruiters actually use ATSs to filter applications, right, or candidates? Across industries, across hiring levels, so seniority levels here, the number one filter that recruiters will use is skills first. To see a skills match. Like SAP SuccessFactor as an ATS showcasing skills compatibility, we see that behavior across recruiting behaviors, across industries and platforms and hiring levels. So when you are drafting or optimizing your resumes, one of the things that you should prioritize here is the clear skills match. What skills do you have that match or are relevant to the job that you are applying for? And that is the first thing that recruiters are looking for and filtering for in the ATS here. And then it goes by education, job title, credentials, years of experience, and location. I want to take some time to talk about location here because sometimes the first reaction we get for people seeing location is, why is that even on the list? Why does location matter? Location doesn't say anything about my quality of work, the skills that I have, the experience that I have, what I bring to the table. Location should be very arbitrary. It doesn't even matter, right? So one thing that we have to understand about a recruiter's job is not just looking for the best candidate, but it's also a logistics management, their responsibility here. They do have to manage the logistics about the person coming onto the team. right? So location is about, are you within the location of maybe the company and the company needs for you to be in person or be able to go and visit clients. So we need somebody who's local to the community, local to the geographic location. And that's one reason why they might look at location. And some roles are also maybe if they're like government funded, funded by specific grants, they have stipulations of like this person has to be a resident of this community, or simply for tax reasons because of how their business is registered, they also have to find people who are local to that business. So that logistics criteria is the responsibility of a recruiter as well. So that's why you could be somebody with tons and tons and tons of years of experience, super, super qualified for the job. Like how we said, financial analyst, you could be like have 20 years of experience. If you are outside the zone that we are legally allowed to hire from, then you're also not getting the call back here, right? So that's why location matters sometimes. So take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes if you're getting rejection emails here, it might not be because you are unqualified. It might just be because you are outside of their legal hiring zone for location or just for the logistics here, right? On this list here, was there anything that surprised anyone? Which is like, oh, I expected this to be higher on the list, or I expected this to be lower on the list, or this was really surprising to see on this list. Put it into the chat here. I want to see what your thoughts and feelings are, if anything was surprising. Oh, multiple years of experience is surprisingly low. I thought that would be higher. Perfect, perfect. Education higher than experience was surprising. Credentials would have been higher. Carmina, you bring up a good point. So take this with a grain of salt a little bit here. We do survey recruiters that hire for different levels, so that's why it might be skewed one way or another because these are recruiters who hire at entry level roles and senior management roles. But I think here for the trend here, what is the biggest point is skills is going to be at the top, no matter sort of like which level you are hiring for. Oh, Melissa here. For location, is it better to include where you want to work if you're open to relocating? That's a really good question. Nick, do you want to take that?
Yeah, great question. And
Hmm.
there's kind of a strategy to this. So if you are currently residing in, say, Santa Clara, and you are applying for jobs in Austin, Texas, the idea here is that while your current address that you have on your resume may state Santa Clara, the ATS system, when you start applying for that, one of the things that position in Austin, Texas, one of the things that it's going to look for is we're looking for people within like a 20 to, I don't know, 50-mile radius of our headquarters. Because this may be like a hybrid position and you may need to come into office 2 days a week. If that's the case, then the system is essentially going to say, all right, Melissa, you're based in Santa Clara. We can't hire you. You're too far away. It doesn't even necessarily get to that component of relocating. So the strategy here would be to put in on your resume the place that you're applying for. So stating, yeah, Austin, Texas, that area code or zip code or whatever. The idea here is that you're not getting weeded out by the automation first. And if you do yield that interview, you can immediately tell them, yeah, we're actually currently relocating to Austin. We'll be there in a week. And depending on starting time, we could be there early, whatever it takes. But you'll admit that right away. You just don't want to be weeded out. You don't want the automation to be the one making the decision on that. You want the recruiter and the team to be the one making the decision.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, very good points here. So yes, put your location for where you want to be in on your application so you're not immediately weeded out here. There's another great question here. Can we talk more about ATS filters, filtering job titles? Right. Job titles is one of those things that helps a recruiter make assumptions about your credentials, your experiences, things like that. Hmm. Um, this is actually actually no, we'll go to that slide in a minute here. So job title match is just a very easy way for a recruiter to say, okay, they have the baseline qualifications. Oh, we're good to go. Now we maybe want to just talk about like culture fit, team fit, things like that. Or they have the years of experience here. I know job titles are not consistent across companies, and some companies will be very creative with their job titles here. But what you want to remember here is your resume is not a legal government document, right? You don't have to always have your job title be what your company called them. So, for example, here, For my role, I internally would call myself like a partner success manager. Within this industry here, my job title or the equivalent job title is customer success manager, customer experience manager, client success manager. I've seen customer engagement manager, client happiness manager, I have seen as well. Depending on the company I am going to apply for, I'm going to adjust my job title to reflect what they are calling it as well. So instead of partner success manager for a different company, if I'm sending out an application, I will change it to customer engagement manager. Because I have those equivalent skills, my company just called it different from something from your company, but we are talking about essentially the same role. I am not inflating the level of my role. I'm not saying that I've been a director of customer success and education, but just those sort of simple tweaks here because recruiters also themselves know it's not always consistent here. So even if you're maybe like your company is calling you like an office manager, but really you're a like chief operations officer for some of you, right? Find what is your industry equivalent and also sort of the equivalent for the seniority here. That can be reflected in your resume, that can be reflected on your LinkedIn here. And good recruiters also might filter for multiple different types of job titles. But that's what I'll recommend here. You don't always have to call yourself what your company called you, especially if they're going to try to be very creative and call you something very unique that is going to be quite different from the rest of the industry here. Nick, go for it.
Yeah, I got a good question here from Shreya. Shreya says, let me lower my hand. Wouldn't it be harder for us to optimize our resume according to different ATSs that companies use? The whole system feels like it's truly trying to make it harder to job hunt. I can't agree with that more. How is the applicant who is actively hunting for a job, along with juggling other activities, supposed to move past an ATS stage and make sure that a recruiter actually sees their resume without making 500 different versions? Wow, well-hearted too. People want to know this one. So I can't agree more. Like I said, ATSs can be unfair. They weed out good competition all the time. But at the end of the day, these systems do work. It requires an applicant to actually spend time not just reading through the job description, but kind of identifying how they align with the job description. So there's like a good practice within it. Making different copies of your resume to appeal to different industries, that's really the bread and butter of like a tool like Jobscan. The idea here and the message behind Jobscan is that we need to optimize every single resume to every single role. That's the best way to get through an applicant tracking system. Our users and those that utilize automation often will see 3 times the amount of interviews and 46% less time searching for a job. I know that that's a stat that's coming up later, but I'll jump the gun on it. At the end of the day, when you're doing optimization, you should be utilizing automation to counter that ATS automation. So a tool like JobScan can expedite that process, make it quicker, and like statistically, excuse me, statistically, our users spend about 22 minutes optimizing their first resume, but by the fifth scan, that drops down to about 6 minutes per resume. So like as you stick with it, you're gonna get faster at it. And to bust out, 500, I don't think you'll need to do 500 because you're gonna be optimizing every role, you're gonna be getting better results. But I do agree that it's unfair and that it does make it harder, but it makes the recruiter's job so much easier to have these individuals that have created documents that are dedicated for their roles, if that makes sense.
Hey, let's keep it rolling. We're addressing a lot of your questions here with the rest of the things that we are going to show from like recruiter survey and understanding how they make decisions here. So I'll wrap up here in terms of behavior on ATSs. What I will say about this behavior on ATS is also very much reflected in the behavior in manual review of a resume. So this is screen grabs from a YouTube video that exists on the internet. That is an eye tracking study following the eye patterns of a recruiter as they are manually reviewing your resume here. In this video, in this eye tracking study, what we did find is that they are also looking for skills matching first. Skills matching first is what they're reviewing within the 6 to 7 seconds that they are reviewing your resume. So whether you are applying online for on a job board, anything like that, or bringing a resume in person to a career fair, a networking fair, what you want to make sure is highlighted in your resume or the most evident is a skills match to the job that you are applying for. One interesting thing that comes out from this eye tracking study as well is if you have worked at a popular company, a company that's quite famous, like let's say you put in there that you worked at Google, and that's something that will attract the eye attention of a recruiter to say like, oh, Google. But immediately when they hover over that job experience, then they were like, okay, do you have relevant skills and experience from Google? So if you were like somebody that was just like an assistant at Google and in a completely not relevant type of role, they'll be like, ah, okay, not relevant anyway. Let's go to the next thing. Thank you, next, thank you, next, thank you, next. Right. So take sort of this list here as also still the foundations of what to highlight in an application, whether it is applying online or applying in person or providing in person for a person to review manually. All right. Okay. So let's look at other factors that will influence the interview rates that outside of your resume here. So Shreya, to answer your question as well, other than you don't have to necessarily always optimize for like 500 different things. There are other different strategies that you can incorporate as well that will help you to make a good impression on the recruiter here. So one of the things here, first things, an optimized LinkedIn profile. An optimized LinkedIn profile will increase your interview chances 2.2 times. So everybody here, give me a thumbs up if you have a LinkedIn profile, if you exist on LinkedIn somewhere. Okay, good amount of thumbs here. For those of you who gave me a thumbs up here, give me a heart emoji if you have updated your LinkedIn profile in the last 3 months. Okay, a good amount of folks have updated their LinkedIn profile. Wonderful. Okay. 92% of recruiters will go to your LinkedIn profile to vet you as a candidate during the recruitment process, and 87% of recruiters will utilize LinkedIn as a sourcing tool. So they're window shopping for candidates like yourself on LinkedIn, right? HR tech companies know that LinkedIn is such a huge part of the recruitment process that many of the ATSs are updated with ways to track changes on your LinkedIn profile. Okay, so for example, I'll show you one of the capabilities of Greenhouse, an ATS that we have mentioned multiple times here. Okay. So, I'm going to use Nick as an example here. Let's say here I am a recruiter at Airbnb. Airbnb is a company that utilizes Greenhouse here. 2 years ago, Nick applied to a position at Airbnb. I was the recruiter. I reviewed his resume, his LinkedIn profile. All looks good. Moved to the interview process, but unfortunately not the successful candidate. So sorry, Nick here. But it's been 2 years and Nick now has reapplied to Airbnb for a more senior position. I'm that same recruiter. I see that Nick has applied before. Within my ATS here, I can see, oh, okay, Nick has applied before. Let's look at his profile before. Let's look at his resume before compared to his resume now. What has changed? What new things has he added? But within Greenhouse as well, my Greenhouse, my ATS, I can see, let's look at Nick's profile, LinkedIn profile from 2 years ago and compare it to Nick's LinkedIn profile now, because that historic data is available to me. So I can see in those 2 years on LinkedIn, did Nick add a new work experience? Did Nick change location? Did Nick get new certificates and skills? Did Nick get new recommendations from friends and families and coworkers? Those changes I have access to see Nick's change over time, his career progress, his career growth, his career development, right? Which is why it's important for you to also document your changes, update your LinkedIn consistently, because you never know who is keeping tabs on you, because they can keep tabs on you if you are an interesting candidate. Here's a screen grab here from Dynamics ATS. Dynamics ATS is the ATS developed by Microsoft, okay, that is sold on the market here. One of their value props for their applicant tracking right here is LinkedIn. So stop wondering if your candidate's information is up to date. Easily access LinkedIn profile so you can know whether or not they took a new job, are looking for a new job, updated their contact info, or have new recommendations or skills. So for recruiters who are window shopping for candidates like yourself, if you're an interesting candidate, they might keep tabs on you within their ATS. And if you're making any changes, they don't have to go to your LinkedIn every other day, every other week to manually sort of review your LinkedIn and any changes there. Their ATS is doing that for them. So for those of you who did not give me a thumbs up that you exist on LinkedIn, this is a reason why you should get yourself on LinkedIn and then update your profile with lots of relevant content for that industry, for the jobs that you want, and show your sort of career progress over time. There's so much happening in the chat. Nick, it looks like you are trying to address all of the questions here.
Yeah, but they're all direct messages, so I don't think you're actually seeing the results.
Oh, okay. Good luck. I'll let you keep going on that. All right. Let's look back here at this survey here of other factors that influence interview rates, cover letters as well. For those of you who gave me a thumbs up earlier in the presentation where I asked, are you actively job seeking? Give me a thumbs up if in your last job application you included a cover letter. 1, 2, 3. That was not 4. That was not as many. Okay, we're getting some more here. Okay, but I still don't think this was as many as people who said they were job searching. I know cover letters are not a thing that is requested, or mandatory as part of the job search anymore. Not all job postings will ask for it. But in our survey for recruiters, we do find that including a cover letter will increase your interview chances 3.4 times. While it is not asked for, recruiters sometimes will take your extra effort to put in a cover letter as going above and beyond. Recruiters like that, right? But we'll jump to another sort of infographic here to talk about other expectations that recruiters will have other than the content of your cover letter. So, what makes a candidate stand out in 2025 here? Showcasing measurable achievements on your resume. So, having numbers, if any of you have consulted with a career coach or career advisor, that is something I know your career advisor has said to you. Having numbers on your resume is a great way to attract the eye attention of the recruiter. It'll pull their eye focus there. Great, numbers are always amazing. And tailoring the resume to match the job description. So, I think Shreya was the one who had asked there about having like 500 different types of resumes here. It is unfortunately the expectation of a recruiter that you are tailoring your resume to match the job description. It's not enough anymore to have one good resume that you're just everywhere. It is not going to work anymore. You have to tailor it because again, in that manual review or even with the ATS, they are trying to look for the best match of a candidate. So you have to be able to tailor it there. Now, going back to cover letters here, writing a personalized cover letter that highlights the company's values is what is an expectation of a recruiter. So it's not enough for you to regurgitate your resume in a cover letter. They want to see personalization and they want to see value alignment as well. Now in the year 2025, 2026, right? With this sort of generational change of like millennials and Gen Z being the majority of the workforce, values is one of those things that is a huge driver for why people change jobs, which is also reflected in recruiting teams. Okay. So they want to see value alignment. How do you align with this company's mission, the vision? Are you able to walk the talk of this company? Recruiters love to see that. All right. Now we talked about LinkedIn, right? Having a LinkedIn profile that aligns with your application. And this last two here, I want to highlight as other efforts that you can make. So we talked about your application being ATS friendly. I'm trying to filter for ATSs here, having a LinkedIn profile, all of that. But beyond that, you also can make efforts for networking and putting yourself out there. Nothing will beat networking. Nothing will beat sort of having a connection to get you through the door, referring you to a company here. Okay, so networking and following up professionally, one of those things that you will get a really good return on investment if you're investing your time in making efforts to put yourself out there. Okay, so this is one of our last slides here that we will take to wrap up with our last 10 minutes here. So when we look at where applicants come from versus where hires come from in terms of their source, job boards will be the majority, the biggest chunk of the pie here. It's the easiest way for companies to advertise that they are hiring and easiest way for job seekers to see companies that are hiring. But let's pay attention to here to referrals. Applicants for referrals here, 2%. But for hires, referrals take up 11%, almost 12 of the pie here. This is something that companies invest time and resources to because getting a referral here greatly reduces their hiring cost here. It is a cost saving mechanism for companies. For them to advertise that they are hiring, for them to go through a whole process to find a candidate, that cost is immediately so much reduced when an employee is saying like, I have a friend who I think is going to be a great fit here, fit for our culture, fit for our vision, our mission, fit for the team here. That is so heavily invested in that many companies have referral programs. So incentivizing their employees to bring in new people, right? There are incentive programs that are like if you refer somebody who's makes it past their 3 month probation, you and your friend get $500 cash bonus. Right. And then also depending on the different hiring level, that could be increased as a monetary value here. That is something that companies will invest in. So if you can hang out with alumni, hang out with other sort of employer partners that come to campus for any of you who are in SCU right now, right? Make connections on LinkedIn, make connections through networking groups, things like that. If you can get somebody to introduce you to somebody who makes a hiring decision, that is going to dramatically increase your chances at not only getting the interview, but getting the actual job as well, getting fully hired. Okay? Awesome. That's where we will kind of end here on our last slide talking about Jobscan. Nick, how are we doing with all of the questions in the chat and in your DMs?
My arthritis is kicking in.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got to every question. I appreciate the direct messages here, but hopefully I got a lot of answers out there. I just put access to Jobscan again in the chat. I mean, Jobscan is our intentions with this tool are to create like an all-in-one suite for the pre-applicate or pre-interview process. So that's resume building, and I did put a little note in the chat about resume optimization in terms of ATS-friendly resumes, making sure that your resumes don't have 3 columns, tables, graphs, photos, headers, footers, things like that to ensure that the ATS can parse it correctly. There's a good video that I put in the chat on that. And then also the free links as well. But sorry, I'm rambling now. Resume building, resume optimizing to job descriptions, cover letter generating, LinkedIn optimization, job tracking, just again, an all-in-one tool there. So I definitely suggest checking it out. Okay. I also said that we would do another question here. So this is a very attentive workshop. Usually when we're working with students, all the cameras are off and we get nothing in the chat. So this is really refreshing. I appreciate you all. Okay, we got another giveaway here. So get your fingers ready. Yeah, so sorry. Back to this question that's in here. This link goes to pick a plan. That middle plan there is, I think initially that plan is $89.95 a quarter for 3 months, and I believe it's marked down to $29.95 for this team. So that is a discount code in there. All right, our next trivia question, or I guess quiz question here. It's going to be a little bit longer, and I am hoping that whoever responds first, and when you do respond, you have your entire answer in a single text, so not listed, because I'm asking for 3 things. Can anybody here, spelling doesn't count. Can anybody here name 3 applicant tracking systems that we identified today?
People are typing.
That was so fast. Wow.
Woo!
I ain't going to say your name wrong.
Tatiana was on the
Tatiana
top
Potter. Yes, Tatiana Potter. Greenhouse, Workday, and Lever. Yes, the idea here is that you don't need to know what every single applicant tracking system's name is and how it works. Jobscan, yes, it does identify the ATS and it will tell you exactly what that ATS's qualifications are. But at the end all, when we are generating and optimizing resumes, we are aligning with universal practices for all 70 applicant tracking systems that we're identifying and that we do market research on. So like, yes, maybe Greenhouse doesn't recognize different tenses of terminology, but we're taking that understanding and we are pushing it across for all ATSs. So when you utilize our tool, we're expediting the process by, yes, we're telling you the ATS, but you don't need to follow the exact qualifications because we're going to auto parse that for you. Okay.
Awesome. So Tatiana, if you wanted to message Nick your contact details, like your email, please go ahead and DM Nick. For those of you who did have questions that we did not get to, we have the last 5 minutes here. Feel free to repost the questions in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we can. But I also did want to leave time for Dylan to come back if we wanted to wrap us up with any other events that are happening, any other things that we want to flag here for the audience.
Thank you very much, Liana and Nick. Please join me in giving them a round of applause for a wonderful and informative presentation. And my own apologies, there's some construction happening nearby, which you may hear in the background. So I'll make this short and sweet before, any Q&A that we might want to do with some of the students. The Career Center is hosting 3 more virtual summer workshops, and I'll just briefly share my screen here. Our next one is July 22nd, Building a Fearless Job Search. And then on July 31st, we'll be joined by LinkedIn representatives who will be talking about building a LinkedIn profile and using LinkedIn Learning. And then our last one will be August 12th, Tips from Recruiters, where we'll have a panel discussion with 3 to 4 recruiters from a variety of industries to talk about their perspective on how to be successful in the job search. So I encourage everyone to register, sign up. We'd love to see you all at those future sessions. And thank you, Jobscan. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Liana. And I'll stop. And if there are any questions, we can use the last couple of minutes for that.
There's a good question here about folks who are career changers and changing careers, and I did get some in my DMs as well about that. I will share here of like what tips for not just resume or cover letter optimization, but for LinkedIn as well. And Dylan and Shauna as career practitioners, feel free to also hop in here for those tips for career changes. My tips here is in your applications, in your cover letter, in your LinkedIn, if you are able to highlight the most transferable skills from one industry to another, that's going to be your best bet for showcasing relevant skills. So when we look at skills matching, a transferable skill is still a skill that matches. So whatever is the most transferable, identify that, and that can be the basic, the meat and potatoes of your resume, your cover letter, and your LinkedIn as well. Dylan, Shauna, as career practitioners, do you want to add anything to that?
Just double tap on that. Thank you. Shauna, do you have anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it comes down to tailoring it to the job description. So again, that's really the most important piece of advice for sure.
I think that
Yeah. Go ahead.
it takes a lot to find a job. And I totally understand it, especially the optimization process. They say the job search process is like having a job, but you're not getting paid for it. So don't give up. Hit a goal. If that's 3 applications a day, hit that goal every day. I also couldn't promote more job board notifications. LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster you have to pay for, so don't do that one. But Glassdoor, if you set up profiles in there, you can put in, where you live, Seattle, Washington. I'm interested in account management roles in tech. Every morning you'll wake up to new listings from an email that say, these listings have been posted. Optimize your resume, apply that day. That's one of the best advice I can give you, or job board notifications. Handshake does it too, so check that out.
Carlson, I know we parking lot your question. I can't find it anymore in the chat. I'm so sorry. We're at the time here, and I want to respect everybody's time here, and I want to respect Dylan's time. And I'm so sorry we parking locked that and we didn't get to it. I can
We
hang
will
out
be
for
putting on another presentation,
yeah.
probably either in the fall or maybe later this summer. We'll be working with Dylan and the Santa Clara team to get that out, and we'll make sure that everybody on this list is invited to that. We'll be doing a Jobscan walkthrough. Also, I've been seeing a lot about the recording in here, and yes, this was recorded. And Dylan, I assume it will be redistributed.
Yeah, we'll be posting it on our YouTube page within the next 1 to 2 weeks. So take a look for it there. It's SCU Career Center on YouTube. That's where you can find it. All right, Nick, Liana, thank you very much. If you are not affiliated with Santa Clara, make sure to use that promo code that Nick shared at the very beginning. If you are a Santa Clara student, you have free access to JobScan. So go in and start using it. And we'll see you all at the next summer workshop on July 22nd, Building a Fearless Job Search. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good summer.
Thank you.